Hello again. So, as we know, Mig is in the castle. She was a servant girl and she was supposed to bring the princess some red thread, connection to Despereaux, and do a curtsy. But she took too long, so Louise, the head of the servants, was like, forget it. So, she was very upset with her. So, now, chapter 30, To the Dungeon. I think that was a chapter in Despereaux's book, the first. At the castle, for the first time in her young life, Mig had enough to eat. And eat she did. She quickly became plump and then plumper still. She grew rounder and rounder and bigger. Only her head stayed small. Reader, as the teller of this tale, it is my duty, from time to time, to utter some hard and rather disagreeable truths. In the spirit of honesty, then, I must inform you that Mig was the tiniest bit lazy, and too, she was not the sharpest knife in the drawer. That is, she was a bit slow-witted. Because of these shortcomings, Louise was hard-pressed to find a job that Miggery Sow could effectively perform. In quick succession, Mig failed as a lady-in-waiting. She was caught trying on the gown of the visiting duchess. A seamstress, she sewed the cloak of the riding master to her own frock. And as a chambermaid sent to clean a room, she stood open-mouthed and delighted, admiring the gold walls and floors and tapestries, exclaiming over and over again, "Gor, ain't it pretty? Gor, ain't it something then?" and did no cleaning at all. And while Mig was trying and failing at these many domestic chores, other important things were happening in the castle. The rat, in the dungeon below, was pacing and muttering in the darkness, waiting to take his revenge on the princess. And upstairs in the castle, the princess had met a mouse, and the mouse had fallen in love with her. Will there be consequences? You bet. Just as Mig's inability to perform any job well had its consequences, for finally, as a last resort, Louise sent Mig to the kitchen, where Cook had a reputation for dealing effectively with difficult help. In Cook's kitchen, Mig dropped eggshells in the pound cake batter. She scrubbed the kitchen floor with cooking oil instead of cleanser. She sneezed directly on the king's pork chop moments before it was to be served to him. "Of all the good-for-nothings I have encountered," shouted Cook, "surely you are the worst, the most cauliflower-eared, the most good-for-nothingest. There's only one place left for you. The dungeon." "Eh?" said Mig, cupping a hand around her ear. "You are being sent to the dungeon. You are to take the jailer his noonday meal. That will be your duty from now on." Reader, you know that the mice of the castle feared the dungeon. Must I tell you that humans feared it too? Certainly, it was never far from their thoughts. In the warm months, a foul odor rose out of its dark depths and permeated the whole of the castle. And in the still, cold nights of winter, terrible howls issued from the dark place as if the castle itself were weeping and moaning. "It's only the wind," the people of the castle assured each other. "Nothing but the wind." Many a servant girl had been sent to the dungeon bearing the jailer's meal, only to return white-faced and weeping, hands trembling, teeth chattering, insisting that they would never go back. And worse, there were whispered stories of those servant girls who had been given the job of feeding the jailer, who had gone down the stairs and into the dungeon, who had never been heard or seen again. Do you believe that this will be Mig's fate? Gor, I hope not. What kind of a story would it be without Mig? "Listen, you cauliflower-eared fool," shouted Cook. "This is what you do. You take the tray of food down to the dungeon, and you wait for the old man to eat the food, and then you bring the tray back up. Do you think you can handle that?" "Hey, I reckon so," said Mig. "I take the old man the tray, and he eats what's on it, and then I bring the tray back up. Empty it would be. Then I bring the empty tray back up to the deep downs. That's right, said Cook. Seems simple, don't it? But I'm sure you'll find a way to bungle it. Said Mig. Nothing, said Cook. Good luck to you. You'll be needing it. She watched as Mig descended the dungeon stairs. They were the very same stairs, reader, that the mouse Despero had been pushed down the day before. Unlike the mouse, however, Mig had a light on the tray with the food. There was a single flickering candle to show her the way. She turned on the stairs and looked back at Cook and smiled. That cauliflower-eared good-for-nothing fool, said Cook, shaking her head. What's to become of someone who goes into the dungeon smiling, I ask you? Reader, for the answer to Cook's question, you must read on. Chapter 31, A Song in the Dark. The terrible foul odor of the dungeon did not bother Mig. Perhaps that is because sometimes when Uncle was giving a good clout to the ear, he missed his mark and delivered a good clout to Mig's nose. This happened often enough that it interrupted the proper workings of Mig's olfactory senses. And so it was that the overwhelming stench of despair and hopelessness and evil was not at all discernible to her, and she went happily down the twisting and turning stairs. "Gor!" she shouted. "It's dark, ain't it?" "Yes, it is, Mig," she answered herself. "But if I was a princess, I would be so glittery light-like, there wouldn't be a place in the world that was dark to me." At this point, Mig Risau broke into a little song that went something like this. "I ain't the Princess P, but someday I will be. The P, baby, but the P, haha, someday I will be." Mig, as you can imagine, wasn't much of a singer. More of a bellower, really. But in her little song, there was, to the rightly tuned ear, a certain kind of music. And as Mig went singing down the stairs of the dungeon, there appeared from the shadows a rat, wrapped in a cloak of red and wearing a spoon on his head. "Yes, yes," whispered the rat, "a lovely song, just the song I have been waiting to hear." And Roscuro quietly fell in step beside Mig Risau. At the bottom of the stairs, Mig shouted out into the darkness, "Gor, it's me, Mig Risau. Most calls me Mig, delivering your food. Come and get it, Mr. Deep Downs." There was no response. The dungeon was quiet, but it was not quiet in a good way. It was quiet in an ominous way. It was quiet in the way of small, frightening sounds. There was a snail-like slither of water oozing down the walls, and from around a darkened corner there came the low moan of someone in pain. And then, too, there was the noise of the rats going about their business, their sharp claws hitting the stones of the dungeon, and their long tails dragging behind them through the blood and muck. Ooh. Reader, if you were standing in the dungeon, you would certainly hear all of these disturbing and ominous sounds. If I were standing in the dungeon, I would hear those sounds. If we were standing together in the dungeon, we would hear these sounds, and we would be very frightened, and we would cling to each other in fear. But what did Mig Risau hear? That's right, absolutely nothing. And so she was not afraid at all, not in the least. She held the tray up higher, and the candle shed its weak light on the towering pile of spoons and bowls and kettles. "Gor," said Mig, "look at them things. I ain't never imagined there could be so many spoons in the whole wide world." "There is more to this world than anyone could imagine," said a booming voice in the darkness. "True, true," whispered Roscuro. "The old jailer speaks true." "Gor," said Mig, "who said that?" And she turned in the direction of the jailer's voice. Chapter 32, Beware the Rats. The candlelight on Mig's tray revealed Gregory limping toward her, the thick rope tied around his ankle, his hands outstretched. "You," Gregory presumes, "have brought food for the jailer." "Gor," said Mig. She took a step backward. "Give it here," said Gregory, and he took the tray from Mig and sat down on an overturned kettle that had rolled free from the tower. He balanced the tray on his knees and stared at the covered plate. "Gregory assumes that today again there's no soup." "Eh?" said Mig. "Soup!" shouted Gregory. illegal, shouted Mig back. Most foolish, muttered Gregory as he lifted the cover off the plate. Too foolish to be born. A world without soup. He picked up a drumstick and put the whole of it in his mouth and chewed and swallowed. Here, said Mig, staring hard at him, you forgot the bones. Not forgotten. Chewed. Gore, said Mig, staring at Gregory with respect. You eats the bones? You are most ferocious. Gregory ate another piece of chicken, a wing, bones and all, and then another. Mig watched him admiringly. Someday, she said, moved suddenly to tell this man her deepest wish, I will be a princess. At this pronouncement, Churruska, who was still at Mig's side, did a small, deliberate jig of joy. In the light of the one candle, his dancing shadow was large and fearsome indeed. Gregory sees you, Gregory said to the rat's shadow. Roscuro ceased his dance. He moved to hide beneath Mig's skirts. Shouted Mig. What's that? Nothing, said Gregory. So you aim to be a princess. Well, everyone has a foolish dream. Gregory, for instance, dreams of a world where soup is legal. And that rat, Gregory, sure has some foolish dream, too. If only you knew, whispered Roscuro. What? Shouted Mig. Gregory said nothing more. Instead, he reached into his pocket and then held his napkin up to his face and sneezed into it. Once, twice, 3 times. Bless you, shouted Mig. Bless you, bless you. Back to the world of light, Gregory whispered, and then he balled up the napkin and placed it on the tray. Gregory's done, he said, and he held the tray out to Mig. Done, are you? Then the tray goes back upstairs. Cook says it must. You take the tray to the deep downs, you wait for the old man to eat, and then you bring the tray back. Them's my instructions. Did they instruct you, too, to beware of the rats? The what? The rats. What about 'em? Beware of them, shouted Gregory. Right, said Mig. Beware the rats. Roscuro, hidden beneath Mig's skirts, rubbed his front paws together. Warn her all you like, old man, he whispered. My hour has arrived. The time is now, and your rope must break. No nibbling this time, rather a serious chew that will break it in 2. Yes, it's all coming clear. Revenge is at hand. Chapter 33. A Rat Who Knows Her Name. Mig had climbed the dungeon stairs and was preparing to open the door to the kitchen when the rat spoke to her. May I detain you for a moment? Mig looked to her left and to her right. Down here, said Roscuro. Mig looked at the floor. Gore, she said, but you're a rat, ain't you? And didn't the old man just warn me of such? Beware the rats, he said. She held the tray up higher so that the light from the candle shone directly on Roscuro, and the golden spoon on his head, and the blood-red cloak around his neck. There's no need to panic, none at all, said Roscuro. As he talked, he reached behind his back, and using the handle, he raised the soup spoon off his head, much in the manner of a man lifting his hat to a lady. Gore, said Mig, a rat with manners. Yes, said Roscuro. How do you do? My papa had him some cloth much like yours, Mr. Rat. Red like that. He traded me for it. Ah, said Roscuro, and he smiled a large, knowing smile. Ah, did he really? That is a terrible story. A tragic story. Reader, if you will pardon me, we must pause for a moment to consider a great and unusual thing. A portentous thing. That great, unusual, portentous thing is this. Roscuro's voice was pitched perfectly to make its way through the tortuous path of Mig's broken-down cauliflower ears. That is to say, dear reader, Miggery Sow heard perfect and true every single word the rat Roscuro uttered. You have known your share of tragedy, said Roscuro to Mig. Perhaps it's time for you to make the acquaintance of triumph and glory. Triumph, said Mig. Glory? Allow me to introduce myself, said Roscuro. I am Churruska. Friends call me Roscuro. And your name is Miggery Sow. And it is true, is it not, that most people call you simply Mig? Ain't that the thing, shouted Mig. A rat who knows my name? Miss Miggery, my dear, I do not want to appear too forward so early in our acquaintance, but may I inquire, am I right in ascertaining that you have aspirations? What do you mean aspirations? Shouted Mig. Miss Miggery, there's no need to shout. None at all. As you can hear me, so I can hear you. We two are perfectly suited each to the other. Roscuro smiled again, displaying a mouthful of sharp yellow teeth. Aspirations, my dear, are those things that would make a serving girl wish to be a princess. Gore, agreed Mig. A princess is exactly what I want to be. There is, my dear, a way to make that happen. I believe that there is a way to make that dream come true. You mean that I could be a Princess Pea? Yes, your highness, said Roscuro, and he swept the spoon off his head and bowed deeply at the waist. Yes, your most royal Princess Pea. Gore, said Mig. May I tell you my plan? May I illustrate for you how we can make your dream of becoming a princess a reality? Yes, said Mig, yes. It begins, said Roscuro, with yours truly and the chewing of a rope. Mig held the tray with one small candle burning bright, and she listened as the rat went on, speaking directly to the wish in her heart. So passionately did Roscuro speak, and so intently did the serving girl listen, that neither noticed as the napkin on the tray moved. Nor did they hear the small mouse-like noises of disbelief and outrage that issued from the napkin as Roscuro went on unfolding step by step his diabolical plan to bring the princess to darkness. So did you figure out when Gregory sneezed into the napkin and then put it on the tray? What was he doing? Who did he put on the tray? But that is the end of the third book. And book the fourth is Recalled to the Light. Who's being recalled to the light? Two main characters are leaving the dungeon. Ooh, this is exciting because book the fourth brings all the main characters together. Roscuro, Despero, Miggery Sow, and Princess Pea. And a few of the other minor characters as well. So we're going to wait to read book the fourth because that does bring everything together. And we'll be zooming again soon. So enjoy the rest of the weekend. Bye.